Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you join. It's fun to continue to hear the welcome beeps as more and more of you join. And a huge shout out, Claire, to you and the whole uAspire team for all the work that you all do to make the organization possible. So as Claire mentioned, I'm Jen Stredler. I lead the workforce development team at Salesforce, and the hat I'm more proud of tonight is that I am a proud uAspire board member. I've been working with uAspire for many years, and one of the reasons I'm most drawn to the organization is that its work sits at the intersection of education and equity, and as you just heard from Claire, also very much at the intersection of technology. And this year especially has certainly demonstrated that these issues have never been more deeply connected. COVID-19 has exacerbated disparities in equitable access to both education and technology. And that's exactly why we're having this conversation tonight. I'm thrilled that we have such strong leaders across K-12, higher ed, and the nonprofit sector to share their insights about equity and education in the time of virtual schooling, a global pandemic, and a long overdue racial justice reckoning. And so sincere thanks in advance to Adrian, Curtis, and Jennifer for joining us tonight, and to Rob for leading us in this discussion. And Rob, over to you to get us going.
Thank you, Jen. And thanks to uAspire for hosting this conversation. I'm really excited to be here with my colleagues. So thanks for taking the time to join us. And just a reminder, if you're coming on later, that we're live tweeting at uAspire, and you can use the hashtag EdTech Impact and hashtag partnership. So I thought kind of a way to jump in would be to ask each of you to tell us how you work with students in your organization and how college affordability aligns with your kind of institutional goals and priorities. And maybe start with Jennifer.
Thanks, Rob. I work at the College Board. We connect students to colleges throughout the country, either through our SAT program or our advanced placement program, as well as a range of sort of tools and supports that we provide to students as they work to go through the college process. This year, we have really tried to innovate to do a couple of things with a particular focus in the affordability space, but one to make the most important steps in the path to college as visible, simple, and clear as possible. And so we have identified the sort of core 6 steps that we see in that process, one of which is obviously completing the FAFSA, which is the way that most students qualify for federal financial aid, as well as ultimately access work-study programs, as well as the potential to unlock other state aid programs as well. And so this year, working in partnership with the Benefits Data Trust, we launched a tool called Wyatt, and it is a online chatbot that is available for all students for free. It's accessible 24/7 by text message, but we knew that we were in particular worried about low-income students and ensuring that they were able to participate, have other ways to access advice, knowing that so much of the FAFSA support for students was done through in-person events at school or community groups, and that much of that would just be more limited right now, given the circumstances. And so we launched Wyatt on October 1st. Students can access it at getfafsahelp.org. And we're really hoping that it becomes a digital asset that students can use to get the advice they need in the process. We're also hoping that advisors and counselors are also able to use it, because even as we all live in this digital world, like never has access to caring adults and good advice been more important. So we're also working as hard as we can to get that tool in the hands of caring adults who can also help students. So that's a little bit of what we have been doing so far, Rob.
Great, that's a lot, not a little. Thanks. Adrian, what about from your view in New Hampshire?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And there's a word that Jennifer used that I think we should really pay attention to, and she talked about the digital environment. And oftentimes, the way that I often think of this work that we do, and even in the higher ed space, is that we're talking about a digital environment or a digital ecosystem when very much of what students and learners and families and communities have been used to is an analog environment. And so when we talk about this digital environment, and this is very much supports the hallmark of the mission of SNHU, which is really about transforming lives, we think of the nexus of our work at that place where learners and students and communities are often marginalized from the higher ed system. And so when we think about this digital environment, obviously there are things that the digital divide and all of those things that we think about. But how do you answer the question through the work that you do that helps to mitigate that by actually looking at the digital environment or that ecosystem as a way to enhance accessibility, to enhance affordability, and to enhance success and beyond. And so one of the questions that we often ask in our meetings, be it a management meeting all the way through, is, can we say that a student that started with SNHU is better off when they leave us than when they started?
That's great. Thanks, Adrian. And Curtis, on the ground from your perspective in Oakland.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. And thank you I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you, uAspire for having this event. One of the things, we're a K-12 system. We have about, between our district-run schools and our authorized charter schools, close to 50,000 students. We have around 75% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. But I just wanted to say, our mission and vision is been focused for almost the past decade on being a full service community school district, focused on serving the whole child, eliminating inequities, and preparing every child for college, career, and community. And so that college, career, community readiness has really been our rallying cry for close to a decade. And all of the things that means. Literally, we have very much a cradle to career framework in the district in terms of how we partner with the city, how we think about our work. And so everything we really think about from the time a child's born in Oakland, what is it going to take for us as a community and as a school system to get them over that finish line and graduate and have all the opportunity that we want all of our students to have. And that clearly involves college affordability. One of the cornerstones of being a full service community school district is the idea that our system is necessary but insufficient, meaning that it's really the old kind of African proverb about being a village to raise a child. That's really how we approach education. And so our Oakland Promise, which has been a collaboration between the mayor and the school district and a whole host of grassroots and other community organizations, starts off, it's a cradle to career college accessibility and college persistence strategy that starts off with college savings accounts for babies. And currently we have 750 babies that have a $500 savings account, and it builds through a kindergarten to college program. We have a joint future centers and a whole college counseling, college accessibility. FAFSA completion, as Jennifer mentioned, is a huge part. We have many partners working on making sure that we get to 100% FAFSA completion for all of our students. And then we've already had, since we started this effort, 1,800 graduates awarded $14 million of scholarship funds to attend a CTE, a 2-year or 4-year program. So, that's really, and maybe some of the things that we'll get to later is just, keep in mind that, our work really is around making sure, and let me just go back to that other piece. 88% of the kids that got those scholarships qualify as very low income, and 80% are first in their family to go to college. So our focus is really on closing the equity gap around college access, affordability, and persistence. We want our kids to finish college, not just get there. So that theme, resonates with, a lot of the other pieces that we've done to make sure kids have the conditions to get there, really from pre-K all the way through 12.
Great, thanks, Curtis. And for those of you just coming in, as a reminder, You can submit questions in the chat, and we'll have time towards the end of this segment to get to them. So kind of opening up the conversation, I think one of the things that's been acknowledged already, as Adrian said, is the numerous challenges that kind of COVID has presented for everyone in every segment of education. But before we kind of get to some of those challenges, I think it would be interesting to think about kind of, as we've shifted to kind of all things virtual, what opportunities or surprising things have you seen surface as we've made this shift to virtual learning, thinking about form completion, college affordability support, and other things that you've seen or you've thought about kind of from your vantage point? And I'll open that up to anyone.
Yeah, Rob, I'll start with that. You know, I had mentioned before about this digital ecosystem, and one of the things, so SNHU is one of the largest nonprofit universities in the country with about 170,000 students. We have programs all around the globe, actually. And one of the things that we found that was a surprise, definitely to me and to my colleagues, is that because we, you know, we have our content on a platform and the access and the digital environment, we actually saw students actually completing their competencies and their content faster in the COVID environment. And so one might surmise it might be because, well, there's not much else to do. But again, remembering the demand signals that we were receiving and who we were serving, and you might think that these might be the most vulnerable populations relative to education within this environment. But because we saw our partners and the transformative nature of partnerships all very quickly move to a virtual environment. They didn't have to move hardware, software, they literally just had to extract themselves from buildings, but the services and the supports continued. And so the surprise for me was to actually see the acceleration of pace in ways that were still proving to be not only effective, but the efficacy of the work and the outcomes were really very real.
We have seen similar, that it has enabled exploration of colleges and the college going process to happen in new ways, and enabled many more students to participate in that. When the only way to go is not to sort of get in the car and do a trip. And so it's been really great to see all that innovation of sort of having different ways to tour schools, get information, lots of new ways of doing that. And so I think that's been a really powerful tool for sort of new ways of engaging, new ways of exploring that's opened up for many.
I'll just add quickly, I think for kids that were already, as Adrian said, you know, in the digital, not the analog world, which, you know, happen to be some of our more privileged students, I think there's been some real opportunity. One of the gaps we identified very quickly when we went in shelter in place and closed in the Bay Area under COVID at the very end of March was that we had about over 900 college-bound seniors that we recognized did not actually have a device at home. So these were students that were probably relying on our future centers. They were relying on, you know, things that we basically provided in the brick and mortar schools in terms of access to technology. And so we very quickly, basically, we raised a bunch of private money, and I can get into our Oakland Undivided campaign later, but that particular group of students who already were college bound, we got over 900 of them a computer. About 600 of them actually needed Wi-Fi connection. We got them 5G hotspots, and we provide them tech support all the way up through. They kept these computers. They were actually gifted. They weren't loaners, to make sure they could continue to stay connected to their College of Acceptance in terms of completing forms, getting orientations done. Because we knew that if they didn't have that access to technology, the likelihood of them showing up or having been in a place to be able to complete all of their entry exams, connecting with orientations, that we would have lost so many of those kids to their the start of their college. And so, you know, I think just some of the opportunities, you know, the digital divide is real. And, you know, we've been laser focused in Oakland on using this opportunity to not just address the immediate digital divide with COVID, but to really say, we're going to solve this for the long haul, you know, and there's a whole bunch of work happening around that. But it's just critical in a world where we all have been living digitally for years, and there's still so many American households that do not have access to technology in a way that allows them not just to participate in education, but if you want to file for unemployment, you got to get online. There's all kinds of things that come to you in healthcare, social services, job workforce development, et cetera, that happen online now. And so for us, it was not just a lifeline for the student, but really a lifeline for their family to be connected to critical resources.
Thanks, Curtis. I think we all recognize, especially being here tonight with uAspire, there's great power in partnership, especially in college access work. And I'm wondering if all of you can speak a little bit about how you've partnered with community and college access organizations and educational institutions to more broadly support students, and how, if at all, that's kind of changed or been challenged over the last 8 months.
Rob, I'll talk about 2 partnerships we've had this year. One, I mentioned our partnership with Benefits Data Trust, who have a lot of expertise in supporting families and students through benefits processes. And we worked with them to help build this chat bot that enables us to be able to really scale assistance to students. And it's been a great example of organizations with different expertise coming together to build something new. uAspire was really helpful in giving us advice and guidance throughout the sort of building process of, you know, what are the biggest questions that students are going to have? What's the most important messages that they need? We did a lot to really sort of train the tool so that it's really informed by the sort of best expertise out there. So for us, that was a really exciting example of a tool that felt very timely, that we think is sort of really helping meet a need right now. We've also been partnering with organizations like Strive for College, and they mentor students through the college process, and sort of making that connection and available to students, so that, you know, if they are looking for a mentor right now, they have another way to sort of engage with a mentor and find them. So just some examples of the way that we're hoping to play a connector role, both for organizations that have tremendous expertise and can help support students, but then also provide that caring advice that we know is so important right now.
Rob, I'd put a qualifier and put it in front of partnerships and talk about in terms of transformative partnerships, because there's an exchange there. There's a resource exchange and a mutual benefit. 2 types of partnerships that I'll speak to. We partner with a number of community-based organizations that are really focused on the hybrid college model. And so we're talking about Duet in Massachusetts, Peloton U in Texas, Rivet Schools in California. There's a whole Noble Schools in Chicago. I mean, there's a whole consortium of organizations, and we provide the support and the content for them to really leverage experiences for students and learners to earn a degree through a competency-based education format. And so that's one set of partnerships, and there's quite a few there. And then I mention one that Jennifer and I, that we have through College Board and SNHU, where our work in the global sphere, where we're actually doing refugee education, again, through partnerships with in-country partners delivering competency-based education programming for associates and bachelor's degrees. And through our partnership with the College Board actually helps to sponsor some of the on-the-ground counselors who actually provide that support. And so the transformative nature of partnerships, where there's that mutuality of value, and the value is really focused on the learner.
Great.
Adrian, I love that prefix on the partnerships, because that's how we see them as well. And I'll just go back to the Oakland Promise. There's literally hundreds of partners engaged in the Promise, starting from the Brilliant Baby through the college access and counseling component, higher ed partners across the country from our local community colleges and others, historically Black universities, the UC and the CSU system. There's so many partners that we've had in terms of just like the FAFSA and even some of the college pieces. uAspire is actually a partner at the College Bound Brotherhood, the Marcus Foster Educational Institute. There's just literally dozens of partners that are coordinated and aligned in this effort, and literally working hands-on in many of our schools through the Future Centers, through our college counseling system to really support our kids to get access to college. So, and there's many other partners that I could speak to. Even just on the tech side in terms of some of the systems we've built to ensure that really no kid falls through the cracks in terms of having a 360 view of young people, with early warning indicators, and really making sure that all the conditions of their life and all the resources that they need are being addressed to, again, help them to complete their K-12 career and get into college.
Thanks. So I guess a question for all of you is, and maybe this has been a interesting period to kind of think about these things, but what do you all think that we're getting right now in the way that we're serving students today? And what are learnings that you've been identifying in terms of things we should pay attention to as we try to solve for pathways and ecosystems and opportunities as we kind of emerge into a post-COVID kind of educational space?
I think one of the things that we might hear that we're getting right is that for some of our traditionally aged learners, they're saying, well, finally, you've caught up with us in terms of how we like to engage with content. So there's that. And, much as Curtis and Jennifer have mentioned, we do realize that there still are some inequities in the systems that we have. But part of the problem that we're trying to solve is, again, how do you use technology as an enablement tool to actually increase that level of access? So when we think about accessibility, how do you factor that in as an enablement tool? Also thinking about this affordability aspect of things. And so we typically, our definition of affordability is that it's at a cost that someone can make. But how do you think about the efficiencies in these new systems of teaching, learning, of access and success that actually help to drive down cost? And so we're not just talking about affordability at that transactional point, but actually thinking about affordability as an experience, and that it actually unleashes more opportunities for learning, for those pathways to engage in those ecosystems in ways that are flexible, in ways that are sort of just in time. The content and the pace allows for the kind of achievement of credentials and whatever that opportunity might be. And so I think it's really unleashing some real opportunities for us to think very differently, even in a highly regulated environment. How do we think differently about this access and affordability?
Just to push on that a little bit, how are you thinking about it?
Well, that's our secret sauce, Rob. No, just no. Well, so here's some very practical examples. So the work that we're doing in our refugee education, we're learning that we could actually find ways to decrease the cost of assessments. And so when you decrease the cost of assessment and evaluation, then that's less of a cost potentially to the learner. As we think about how do you use technology as a tool for enablement, you can build more modularity that allows for greater scale, which really continues to drive down the cost, both in terms of content as well as supports and other services. And so there's a whole way of kind of framing it that if you raise that as a question, and again, if you think about it as from a learner-centric perspective, not from what's best for me as the executive vice president or what's best for this institution, but what's best for the learner, what creates value for the learner, then you're actually operating from a different paradigm.
Curtis?
That's a tough question. We're getting it a lot. I feel like I'm forehead deep in COVID still. And we are trying to really be very cognizant about what we need to start memorializing, codifying, and institutionalizing moving forward that's going to make us better for kids. And I mean, we do have to absolutely, and we have been looking at those pieces and learning. I mean, just around closing the digital divide. I mean, went from a district that was around, most schools were 2 to 1 in the, 2 kids for every computer in the classroom. We had some schools with, other types of funding, particularly in high school, that were 1 to 1, but certainly had a huge gap. And we've purchased through our Oakland Undivided campaign now 35,000 computers, over 10,000 hotspots. And equipping kids in the home, the hardware is just the beginning, and providing the right type of tech support to the student, the teacher, and the family across language, cultural pieces is really quite complex, way more than we thought. But I feel like we're getting to the point where we're becoming a much more digital city as a result of this, and in partnership with the mayor's office, looking at things like citywide broadband, and really, again, this long-term commitment to closing the digital divide. But also even on the teacher side, I think it was a great opportunity. We really rolled out some really robust teacher professional development around all the different platforms we're using, around delivering high quality instruction in the virtual environment. I wish I had known Adrian, 6 months ago. He probably could have been tutoring us on best in class. So that was actually a major lift to kind of like retool our entire system in that. But I think we've learned a lot. We actually, for the first time, bought every single one of our teachers a really good quality device. I mean, they would, because they didn't need it. The standard device was a Chromebook, and in the virtual environment, there's major limitations with using a Chromebook. And so, how do we maintain that, and how do we continue to build teacher capacity in the digital environment to be able to, one, I think we're learning that personalization, which we know is important, is even more important. Knowing we have kids that are actually thriving better in the virtual environment than in the class environment. And then there's a whole bunch to do just around how do we really support families to be able to support their kids in a digital environment. So there's a lot of work we're doing with grassroots community organizations and family engagement to support parents around the use of technology, how their kids get engaged, which is a pretty heavy lift. So I feel like there's some really important pieces we're learning. And then, what I hope is that we're really going to be maximizing like our master teachers, so that we can really, folks that can teach, have expertise and a passion in the subject. We shouldn't be bound by the 24 or 25 to 1 teacher. There's lots of ways, I think, for us to start thinking beyond the classroom and the school walls around what education looks like. And we've launched a number of community-based in-person learning hubs, even though we're still 100% online. And so we're even finding ways of enhancing and augmenting instruction and student supports with non-educators, with youth development people and other types of organizations. And so like, how do we build on those partnerships to continue to build a really strong, education support system for our kids?
Curtis, just to pull on that a little bit briefly, as you think about some of these changes, how are you thinking about them in terms of, are these just temporary, or are these actually going to be permanent changes?
Yeah, that's really a great question. We're actually going to, some of them I think are going to be, I think the way that we're thinking about technology for the long haul, even in terms of what now, because we are pretty much saturated. We had a lot of limitations, even the types of projects that students could get to take home, even when you think about like at the high school level, because we knew that kids did not have technology at home. So I think there's going to be a lot of instruction that's going to be open to kids. We have kids in engineering and media pathways that we even got much better. We didn't give them Chromebooks. We gave them devices that they can actually engage in those, because we're probably close to 90% of our kids are in a linked learning career pathway in high school. Some of those, like I said, in computer science, engineering, media, require higher end devices that they have in their schools, but they don't have at home. And so now they have them at home as well. And so I feel like there's some things that's going to open up even what our teachers were able to do or not do before. That were definite limitations previously. And then I think just there's a whole lot we can do. And we have a lot of teachers collaborating with our academics team to really kind of codify and think about, how we can diversify and personalize and differentiate instruction, which I think is always, the sweet spot you're trying to get to even in classroom instruction. And then I think a lot of these other partnership pieces that we're working on with technology and getting connected to kids in many, many different ways. Many of our systems around student supports have actually functioned quite well in the virtual world. Every one of our schools has a coordination of services team. We were fortunate that we've worked for a while with Salesforce to build a world-class system in their K-12 education cloud that literally is like I compare it to an electronic medical record in the K-12 world, to be able to track in real time all the different adults that are in the life of a child, supporting them, the nurse, the social worker, the community school manager, the community partner. And we have a really good system where we develop care plans for students based on referrals. And now we can actually do that in real time. So the teacher can just go online, send in the referral, and it's all just happening. And it's kind of like operationalizing equity is the way that I call it, because we're getting kids what they need when they need it. But again, these systems are working really well in the virtual environment. We've been referring kids, we've made virtual home visits, we've been doing all kinds of things in the student support arena that's critical to helping kids stay engaged in their instructional life and staying on track to graduation.
Great, thank you. So we have time for one question that we've gotten through participants, and it is, are any of you working individually or collectively on the policy end of access to improving digital access, possibly including requiring internet providers, most of whom are monopolies in their communities, to provide free or subsidized service to low-income families, or in any other ways?
My short answer to that is no, and not anything actively.
We clearly see internet access as just being essential. In particular, we see in rural schools, sort of just access to hotspots and sort of other strategies are just far more difficult to implement. And so, we think that's going to be incredibly important to do, across a range of schools, to really make sure that kids have that internet access, and in particular that high-speed internet access that really enables virtual learning.
Yeah, Rob, I think my second answer to that is no, not actively. But what we're doing is we're really building the tech stack internally to try to mitigate as many of those challenges as possible. So if we can carry the burden of that within our tech infrastructure and our digital environment, then that means it's less of a demand or burden on the learner or the student from where he or they are.
Got it.
Yeah, Rob, you just hit on one of my real I don't know, a pet peeve. I just when this whole COVID thing broke out and you're on the ground and you're trying to close the digital divide, and you realize that you're in a 100% private sector environment and you're trying to solve a social issue, yep. It's really frustrating. And so literally from the governor's office, the SPI's, I've been in touch with all of them. We've done letter, we've been trying to be engaged in policy discussions, but even the governor himself or State Superintendent Tony Thurmond, you're still going to T-Mobile and to AT&T and all of them and negotiating. Basically you're negotiating the best government rate you can get, but you still got to come up with the money and you still got to figure it out. And so, that idea of like, what needs to be put in the public square around a basic need. I mean, for me, Wi-Fi access, should be as fundamental as your plumbing for your water, your gas, your electricity. The way the world works now, it is as fundamental. And if, any of us know, like the second that this thing goes down, we're in a panic, just like we would be if our, we had to call the Roto-Rooter, it's that level of like, I need it right now. And so, the fact that that entire sector is private presents some real policy challenges when it comes to solving those issues. I mean, luckily in Oakland, our city council has taken on a pretty significant broadband effort to be able to start building out citywide broadband. And there's other things that we're trying to do. Even on this Oakland Undivided campaign, we've been having a lot of conversations around how we're going to sustain keeping 40,000 computers in kids' hands, over the long haul and what that's going to take. And so, we're engaged. We have our own lobbyist in Sacramento as a school district. We work on a lot of ed policies with, and so we're going to stay really actively engaged on the policy side around this digital divide, because it could easily be something like you said in 6 months or 12 months to your earlier comment, that, we kind of solved that for the moment and life will move on until the next crisis hits, and then we had never solved it again. And so I don't want to waste this opportunity and be in this boat again when we're needing everybody to be connected in the future.
Great, thank you. And I'm getting the signal that we are out of time. So thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Curtis. And thank you, uAspire, for hosting this great opportunity. And I'm going to turn things over to Amit Patel.